known many engineers in my time, so I imagine that to an engineer of any stripe, mechanical, civil, what have you, systems thinking comes pretty naturally. Why? Well, it's because of the idea that everything affects everything. Nothing happens in isolation from anything else. You can't, for instance, build a bridge without anticipating what weight it will bear, how the wind and elements will affect it, how to make it safe for travelers. As another example, if you have a computer and the computer catches a virus, the computing speed slows down, the screen may flicker, you can't get as much done as you normally would under normal operating conditions. Maybe you can't sync it to your cell phone or print something. Even devices outside the computer are affected. But let's expand that concept a little bit to something more organic, something that maybe everyone in the room can relate to. How about a family? Many different parts all working together, maybe not with common goals, but other things in common, like a shared history and an anticipated shared future. Each person is an individual with their own thoughts, their own anxieties, their own priorities, but they are together, they share the same space, and each person affects all of the others. On a micro level, let's see what happens when one of the children, say, catches a cold. How does the family react? They don't just stick the kid in his room waiting for him to get better. Of course not. No. Mom will take the kid's temperature and cooks healthy, nourishing food. Dad will run to the store to get cough medicine. Big sister goes to the school to get the kid's homework from classes he missed that day. Everyone adjusts to help the one element of the system so that eventually the system can return to its normal functioning state. That's kind of like us here in this place. We aren't just here to spend a Sunday with us up here talking at you and you patiently listening. There's more to the community than just this 1 hour every Sunday. It's not only sharing the load when we have concerns, but sharing in our joys and good fortunes. So when we talk about us as a system, we look at where we are healthy and strong, where we are weak and need help, and how do we use our strength to make the weak parts feel nurtured into the strong parts. This is why I took part in the Healthy Congregations workshop, because even though I wasn't anticipating the idea of systems thinking being explained to me, I already intrinsically knew that this is what healthy congregations are all about. And this was a good way to contribute to the community by helping it maintain its strength and help it grow. Each of the Healthy Congregations participants will share with all of us things that we learned about how we as a system should work and reflect on how healthy we are. For my part, I am proud to say that in my short time here, I have never not known this congregation to be healthy, strong, and in good spirits. With that, I turn the mic over to Michelle, who will talk to us about communication.
Then Jesus took his disciples to the mountain, and gathering them around him, he taught them, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are the meek, blessed are they that mourn, blessed are the merciful, blessed are they who thirst for justice. Blessed are you when persecuted, blessed are you when you suffer. Be glad and rejoice, for your reward in heaven is great." Then Simon Peter said, "Are we supposed to know this?" And Andrew said, "Do we have to write this down?" And James said, "Will we have a test on this?" And Philip said, "I don't have any paper." And Bartholomew said, "Do we have to turn this in?" And John said, "The other disciples didn't have to learn this." And Matthew said, "May I go to the boys' room?" And Judas said, "What does this have to do with real life?" Then one of the Pharisees who was present asked to see Jesus' lesson plan and inquired of Jesus, "Where is your anticipatory set and your objectives in the cognitive domain?" And Jesus wept. This is one of the many handouts that we got in Devon, Pennsylvania from Richard Speck. And the reason that I read it to you was because I remember asking Karen, in our unofficial team captain that I nominated as team captain for Devon, I was saying, but why are we doing this, and why are us five doing this? We're not part of a team together. We're not part of a committee together back home. And I didn't quite understand what I was supposed to do with this big binder of information. And she explained to me, and we sort of figured out in our car rides home, that the point of this is that we are to take these tools and let them infiltrate the various committees that we're on. I'm on SJAA and Karen's on the COM and choir, whatnot. So I kind of finally understood that concept. And another one of the concepts that I learned in Devon was that one of the marks of a healthy congregation is that it plays to its strength. And I can't tell you how many times communication came up as one of the strengths of our congregation. And being new, I thought, well, of course, that's logical. We're so small and we're kind of all in charge of all these things. It's pretty easy to communicate. But as the exercises went on and as we talked to other congregations, I realized that we just actually are doing it correctly and we're doing it right. And I've noticed as a new member of the congregation that our communication skills are strong. I've always gotten truthful, direct answers to any of the questions that I've had. I've always felt welcome to go up to committee heads or the board and talk about any concerns that I have. So I am getting a little bit more practical in my old age, so I wanted to bring you some specific tools that I learned. And one of the concepts that I learned that is sort of goes against healthy communication is a term called triangulation. And triangulation is defined, as my binder defines it, is when a twosome brings in a third party to decrease their tension, create stability, and avoid a painful change. So two people on the inside and one person on the outside absorbing an anxiety of a twosome. So growing up, I was taught that this was venting and that it was kind of healthy to not speak to someone directly about something and sort of to talk about them with someone afterwards or sort of outside of that box. And, I was taught if you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all. And I was triangulating all over the place. But I'm beginning to see how effective it is to just go to the person that I have a conflict with and communicate. I'm realizing how much easier it is to be direct. Now, I know that there are some times, and we had a discussion about this as well. I mean, there are some times that it's nice to have a mediator or someone to sort of, absorb the tension that's going on. But it was an interesting, and it's common sense, I know, but for me it's just been something that I've really been trying to implement into my life right now, and hopefully it will infiltrate the committees that I'm in. And another concept is to not be reactionary, which is, he did what? Right away, which has kept us humans alive for many years. It's instinctual, and it's okay. It's easy to fall into the trap. However, in a system, being reactionary can be damaging, or at least add anxiety to a situation. We also talked about truth-telling, not keeping secrets, and making connections. So as I said, I think this is the section where we get to pat ourselves on the back, because we've found in any of the exercises that we were asked to discuss in a congregation private, we would go off privately in our own congregations and do little exercises. And pretty much 100% of the time, right, guys, we kept saying that communication and our connections with each other was one of our strengths. These proper communication skills with our congregational system are essential to our growth, to our problem-solving capabilities, and in our ever-growing and changing community. And as I said, common sense, but a gentle reminder never hurt anybody. And one place where these people skills serve as the lifeblood of a system is in the painful situation that Jack's going to talk about next. So keep up the good work. We'll need it.
Many of these topics that we talked about were pretty obvious. You think about something like change and you can nod your head and say, of course there's change and we have to deal with it. Change is the norm. Change is inevitable. Change is also fun. It's almost as much fun as quantum physics. And a little side point on that, if there's anybody who has anything that they want to know about quantum physics, please see me afterwards. I've spent the past year mastering every concept in it. One of the neat things I saw about quantum physics was on a TV show. They did a little series on quantum physics. Did anybody see it? You listen to it on the radio or, And And it had this really interesting analogy that I relate to the idea of change. The change is unpredictable. We know it's happening, but we don't always know which direction it's going. So this person had a bowling alley and put a sheet of paper about 1/3 the way through and took a bowling ball and bowled it through the paper, and then the bowling ball hits the pins. Okay. There's a point of observation, and then there's an outcome, and we don't necessarily know that's what's going to happen. So the bowling ball can continue to go through that hole in the paper, but we don't know what it's going to do to the pins. It has to do with our point of observation. And I love that analogy for almost everything in life, and certainly with the idea of change. We think we know where it's going, but that's where we are in our point of observation, quite possibly. Change is necessary. And I think we mostly understand that too. Some of these things seem so obvious, that our bodies are constantly changing, institutions around us change, and change is not only necessary, but it's so much of a part of our life that's getting faster and faster. There may be a lack of comfort, a discomfort with the idea of change. If there is not an adequate amount of discomfort, possibly you could use the word pain, change won't occur. Now, I'm going to break that down into two kinds of change. There are some minor changes, for example, that may not create much in the way of pain or discomfort. People may not notice it. Some people may. One of the changes that we did very subtly today is you may notice that there's a bank of lights, actually 2 banks of lights that aren't on. Aha! Little change for you. People don't care. They don't notice. No big deal. Some people may be a little uncomfortable by that particular change. Then there's big change. We, not that long ago, decided search committee for a minister. And there's a lot of discussion. That's a big deal. And there had to be enough discomfort and pain for us to actually meet, talk about it, and then make a choice. Some people really learn to enjoy that process of change and the dialogue. Once we've decided for a change, we talked about in these sessions that we went to, the 2 things can happen, or will happen. One is when the change is announced, there's a period of excitement. There's a little burst of energy. And then not long after that, people start falling back and saying, ooh, I'm nervous, I'm anxious. What was wrong with the old way? And a whole bunch of things that make us want to cling to what we know and is comfortable occur, and we worry for a bit. There's anxiety. After a while, that begins to fade. And once people get on board for the change, then you go through a whole other series of emotions that may be excitement in various forms. The word that they used that I really liked was there's a process of reconnecting. When there's threat of change at first, we withdraw. And then there's a point where we begin to reconnect. I love that concept. Another thing that happens in the process is that this person broke it down into numbers. I love how they do this. 2.5 of the people are innovators. 16.5 are early followers. So I don't know where they come up with these numbers. So an innovator says, I've got this great idea. And 16.5% of you will say, yes, I'll go with that. Then there's a block of 34%, another block of 34%. The first 34% say, I'm going to start going along with this. The other 34% say, convince me. And then at the very end, and I just didn't even pay attention to the number of this. I didn't write it down. They're the holdouts. They just won't really ever accept that particular change. And why I think this is an interesting thing, forget all the numbers, is that if we can remember at any given point in a change, we've probably played each of these roles. There's someone out there who says, yeah, you know, that was my idea, and look, here we did it. And then the next time there's a change, no, I'm not interested in that particular change. So I think if we can remember as a healthy, functioning congregation that when we are faced with change, that we've played those different roles. We've worn those different hats about being an innovator and someone who supports it right away or someone who stands back and says, you really have to convince me. And I feel convinced that if we keep that in mind, we communicate in a much more authentic and effective manner. I turn it over to Barbara Miller.
This is a season for graduation. Stockton is holding its graduation today. Have you ever heard of the shortest graduation speech in history? It was given by Dr. Harold Hyde of Plymouth State University in New Hampshire. Here it goes. Socrates said, know thyself. Cicero said, control thyself. Jesus said, give thyself. And that was it. Now, Dr. Hyde must have been a remarkable man. He was president of Plymouth State University from 1951 through 1977, and under his tenure, the college grew from 250 students to 3,500. Now, in this speech, though he didn't know it at the time, Dr. Hyde was describing a phenomena that we have come to call self-differentiation. I first heard of self-differentiation at the UU Leadership Institute in 2010. And we were all told to select a focus group, and the focus group I selected received a crash course in systems thinking and how it can be applied to congregations. The most intriguing idea I encountered was self-differentiation. It's not a technique or a set of skills, but it's a way of being and doing in the world. Most of all, self-differentiation requires that you know and understand yourself and how you relate to others. Human beings, according to this way of thinking, are motivated by two basic needs, the need for separateness and the need for closeness. Let me give you some examples. Have you ever felt the need to agree with other people and to have beliefs that identify you as a member of that group? When you're experiencing that, you have the need for closeness. Now, have you ever, on the other hand, just felt a need to be different and express your own individuality? That's when you're expressing the need for separateness. So we all move in and out of balancing these needs, and our whole lives and relationships are spent trying to dance with these competing needs. The needs for separateness and closeness exist in all of us. Now, every human being faces the task of self-differentiation, and it is, quote, a progressive internal interplay between autonomy, separation, and connection, togetherness, while progressing toward goals. So how does this relate to leadership? To be an effective leader, we need to understand where we are in this process of self-differentiation. When I attended this workshop and learned about self-differentiation, we took some surveys to determine where on this scale we were, and I found out that I was not differentiated at all. And that was the reason that I frequently found myself in a situation where my feelings were hurt, I felt my authority questioned, these kind of uncomfortable feelings. And I realized that they all came from this point of view of not really being self-differentiated. A leader who is self-differentiated can hear criticism. They can hear differences of opinion. They can even hear emotional responses without wavering in knowing who they are. That's not to say that they're not listening and not taking it in and willing to work toward compromise, but there's this sense of groundedness about this person. I have a story about some dominoes. This is one of the stories that we were told by Richard Speck, who has used this systems method, and he's actually one of the leaders in teaching it. He's used it for years, and he has this collection of tales called Friedman's Fables. And they're all stories illustrating the ideas of systems thinking. And my favorite one was the domino story. I have to try to tell this from memory. Okay. So there was a set of dominoes, and there were thousands of them. And everything was fine. They just stood where they were standing, and now and then they'd waver. But for the most part, they could upright themselves and stay where they were. But then one day it happened. Domino number 10,101. He teetered and shook, pivoted on its corner, then he righted itself, and then finally fell flat against his neighbor. So this sequence repeated itself at least 100 times before all the dominoes recognized the malignant state of their condition. And as the process continued and the dominoes began to fall, some just gave in without a fight. Others pretended it wasn't happening. A few became so anxious that they fell over before it was their time. So that here and there, the tipping was being replicated in more than one place along the line. Now, the attitude of those that remained standing was pretty uniformed. Each asked itself what it could do to fight this. Some tried to calculate the power in ergs of energy as against the rest mass of their own weight. Others wondered if perhaps some aerodynamic innovation could be conceived to drag this juggernaut to a halt. Still others considered the possibility that they could help their neighbors stem the tide if they could only bring their own strength to greater, hitherto unimagined peaks. And several thought of sacrificing themselves for the greater good by falling before their turn, in the misguided hope that by such action they would in effect create a fire line whose gap the coming conflagration could not bridge. Finally, one domino managed to remain standing. But the cumulative energy, when it got to him, created a backlash. And at some point, the dominoes began to go in the other direction. So they gradually straighten themselves up and then fall again, all the way back to the original 10,101. Now, when it got to the first domino that had fallen, it started going the other way now, mowing down the remainder of those previously untouched, until once again, that last domino that had remained standing, it came around to him, and he didn't go down again. Again, the process abruptly reversed itself now in the original direction. But somewhat spent, the energy being expended was just enough to push each in succession into an upright position without bowling it over. Finally, all were basically standing once again erect, quivering here and there, but basically stable. Now, eventually, all began to focus on that point where things had turned. Which one was it? Which one was it? At that spot, all that could be seen was a domino. Didn't look any different than them in size or shape or weight or color or density. Nor was there any prosthetic device or artifice to help prop it up or reinforce its strength. The entire line was agog. Slowly, each began to realize what it owed to this one member of their community. But how did you do it? They all wanted to know. What did you see that we didn't? The others asked. I'm not sure what the difference was, said the domino that had not dominoed. All I can say is that while each of you kept trying to hold your neighbor up, my concern was that I did not go down. So this is a task of a healthy leader, is to, first of all, know who you are and be able to be that person connected to the mission of your group. And when the group experiences anxiety, which it ultimately will, inevitably will, with change, to be that person who can remain the calm center. A UU leader from another congregation once told me that healthy congregation workshops could create ripple effects in congregations when the participants return to their leadership roles when the workshop is finished. The 5 of us as leaders are works in progress, as is this congregation. In this emotional system called UUCSJS, we can expect change and the accompanying anxiety and possibly conflict. No one ever said it's easy to be an authentic adult. My goal is to be one 51% of the time.
Hi, I'm Karen York, and I'm a charter member of the congregation and a lifelong Unitarian Universalist. As you may know, I'm a teacher for the children in our religious education program and on the Committee on Ministry, and recently became a nominee for the Board of Trustees for next year. I've been part of the congregation since its beginning, since it was first forming, and I've previously served on the board, including several years as treasurer. So I've been around for a while, and over the years I've seen how we as a congregation have navigated different challenges and changes in our relatively short history. We've had 4 ministers and 6 different meeting locations. I'm not even sure I counted this one, 7 maybe, counting this one. And I've seen and participated in the effort to build this beloved community, and I feel privileged to be a part of it. Scott Peck has said, you don't just build community, you rebuild it and rebuild it for as long as you have reason to be together. And I feel that that rings true to me. We completed this building, our home, almost 4 years ago, and as I was thinking about that, I realized this is the longest we've been in any one location. And that's given us a greater sense of stability and permanence. It's been an important change in our congregation. We're able to shift some of our energies away from just surviving as an organization to think about things that we might want to do, how we might want to impact our larger community. There are new possibilities on our horizon, but how do we get there? And this workshop in systems thinking gave me some time to reflect on those sorts of thoughts and how we might get there. We've talked about increasing the time of our minister and staff, inviting and recruiting new energetic members, clarifying our vision and mission, and all of these are parts of the process, parts of the whole. But for a real shift, we may need to move the whole system, like I did with the children when we needed to move the whole system. There's an African proverb that if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together. Together we are co-creating what this congregation will become. That whole requires all the parts, but the whole is larger than the sum of the parts. It's larger than any one idea or any one project or initiative. The shift requires a different point of view, a focus on our interrelationships, our interconnections, our interdependence. In systems thinking, we do not exist independently, but we only exist in relationship to the system, to each other, and to moving the system towards its goal. Good stuff. Jenny Corder of the UUA moderator has put it this way: we need to be reminded that the health of the congregation is as important as the spiritual growth of the individual. And I would add, we need to invest part of our energy in the system. As Unitarian Universalists, we often focus on our individuality. In the 7 principles, there's actually not a lot of systems thinking. I went back and kind of looked. In our 4th principle, for example, we encourage each and every one of us to engage in a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. This is often an individual and uniquely personal quest. Our 1st principle, to promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person, is often interpreted as an affirmation that you are special. In religious education, in one of our lessons that I remember, the 1st principle is taught by teaching a song sung to the tune of 10 Little Indians. I'm unique and unrepeatable, I'm unique and unrepeatable. It's a powerful message for those of us whose self-esteem needs a boost. But the paradox of the first principle is that it's not about your individual worthiness, but everyone else's too. You are special, but so is everyone else. In my current preschool class curriculum, it's called Spirit Play. The symbol for the first principle, the object that we use to illustrate the first principle, is a gift, just a little package, because each one of us is a special, precious gift. And the phrase that we use for the first principle is respect everyone. This idea then ties closely to our third principle, which begins with acceptance of one another. In the children's version of the third principle, we also include so that we can learn from each other, accept one another so that we can learn from each other. This calls us to be attentive to each other and take time to follow as well as lead, to listen as well as to be heard, to create new initiatives as well as come out and support something new, to learn and grow as individuals and as Unitarian Universalist congregation. System thinking focuses not on only the individual pieces or the people, but on the relationships between individuals. In our packet of material, one of the quotes that I liked was, "Relationships are not merely interesting, that's all there is." Unitarian Universalists are a covenantal faith community. People come voluntarily. Membership is voluntary. We are held together by our relationships and by the promises we make to one another. We are responsible for our presence in this world and the effect that that presence has on others. We seek to be in right relationship with other members of the congregation, especially when they have different points of view. Doing so can enable us to expand our understanding of who we are. There's not one right way of being in the world. It's not that we should debate that, but that we should dialogue. We should talk to each other. We should understand different points of view. This means that we need to create a safe environment to hear all points of view that will welcome that dialogue. We need to listen carefully to each other and seek both to understand as well as be understood. We need to be courteous and forgiving with each other, suspend judgment of those with whom we disagree, be firm in our commitment to seeking a mutual solution to our differences, keep our individual needs in balance with the health and vitality of the congregation as a whole. It's a lot to think about. In the words of Connie Goodbread, she's a district executive in the Mid-South District, she said that Unitarian Universalism is a discipline that teaches us to explore the depth of our personal spirituality, that individual part. It teaches us not only responsibility for ourselves and our path, but for the healthy path of others, even when that path leads away from us. Once on our path, we know that it is ever evolving. Our personal truth will change and grow and become. Unitarian Universalism is a living thing and a part of our lives, like our heartbeat or our breath, and just as vital. On the surface, it seems to be simple and to demand very little of its devotees. This is deceptive to the newcomer. Unitarian Universalism is far from a simple faith that demands little from devotees. It demands responsibility, understanding, patience, respect, right relationship, and diligence. It demands we keep searching for the truth, and the real truth is elusive and evolving. Therefore, we can't stop and say we are finished, because we are never finished. We, Unitarian Universalists, are works in progress. So let there be an offering to sustain and strengthen this place, which is sacred to so many of us, a community of memory and of hope. We are now the keepers of the dreams. We will now gratefully give and receive the morning offering.